Yo, what's up, guys? Got a great game tonight. This is the NFL Showdown live before lock. We got the battle for number one overall, and we got Denver visiting the Jets. Kyle Dvorchak, as always, joining me. Kyle, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and although it is, you could not draw up a more Thursday Night Football game. This is the epitome of TNF. But I think because it's so different from essentially every other game we've seen on Showdown, I think there's probably more of an edge in this slate than there is in most ones, because it is quite odd, especially since we've seen all the offenses smashing this year. Like, we're finally dealing with a game that's going to be trashed.
Yeah, this one could be a different line of construction than we've seen built.
Yeah.
Win it. I mean, defense is going to be huge tonight. And I bet this game, Denver, I was like, they got Driscoll. He's not bad. And I learned like an hour after placing my bet that Brett Rippon is starting for the Broncos. And I mean, what the heck? Driscoll's not even injured. So what do you make of this situation to begin with?
I don't like Jeff Driscoll, so honestly, if it were me, I would be like, maybe this isn't so bad. Brett Rippon, you're going to Brett Rippon, so honestly, I can't say it's better. Rippon, I believe, was a 4-year starter at Boise State, threw a lot of touchdowns, but he gives me like Case Keenum, Gardner Minshew vibes, and those don't sound bad. But those are just the guys I could name from that crop. Those are the top percentile outcomes of a guy who's like good but not great at a like Mountain West school. Is Gardner Minshew, who we've seen is fine. And Matt Gajeski, who does a lot of awesome stuff here and covers college football, truly one of the sharpest college football minds that I know, basically said he compares as a lesser Gardner Minshew who has no ability with his legs. So that's quite exciting. And I even saw basically as soon as the announcement was made that it was probably Vic Fangio, although it might have been their offensive coordinator, said that they wouldn't rule out some situational usage from Jeff Driscoll. So what a mess.
Oh man, that could get ugly if you have Rippon. I saw like the props all had a lot of juice on the under for him. So I'm kind of wondering, do people expect there's a high chance he'll get benched? So that'll be interesting to watch. As far as actives and inactives, we got Brashad Perryman. He was expected to be out, and he is. Jamison Crowder is playing. Phil Lindsay, it looked like he might play, but he is inactive. And those are really the only offensive players that are relevant here. So let's talk about just what have you seen in the recent showdown slates? We had that big one with Kansas City and Baltimore on Monday.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how you did. I didn't have a great slate specifically because I wasn't playing a lot of Mahomes at captain. And although, I even talked about it, that he's a guy who definitely he has such touchdown potential and they have such good weapons that he can spread the ball out. And we saw that. I don't know how bad I can feel about him throwing one touchdown to a guy who you literally could not physically roster and another guy who's a fullback. Like, if one of those things happens, I think that's fairly common-ish, common enough where, like we saw, I think it was Alec Ingold from the Raiders. That happens. And I think, obviously people won lineups with I don't know actually if Alec Ingold was the optimal play. But anyways, these weird guys can catch touchdown passes. For it to happen twice and one of the guys literally be unrosterable is the bottom for my lineups was the bottom percentile outcome. If you were playing Patrick Mahomes at captain, was a great slate for you. I wouldn't draw too much from that. And we were trying to think of, I don't think either of us could remember who the 1-5 was that just recently won. It was last Thursday night, James Robinson versus the entire 5 Miami. I would say those two, I would maybe not try and draw too much from them because it was two very strange outcomes. They can definitely happen. I think you have to bake some outlier situations in your roster. If you're not baking some sort of outlier 1 or 2 standard deviation move into your roster, at best case, you have a good median projection. And even if your median projection is perfect, and that does end up happening, nothing crazy happens, you just end up chopping. So I don't know if those are the outlier situations I would play for, running back versus 5 opponents and Patrick Mahomes throwing to a lineman and a fullback. But I do think you have to make some plays, whether or not those are the plays you make. You have to make some plays that aren't just I think running backs get, some touches and then the quarterbacks throw for 250 yards. Like everyone, or at least a lot of casual players or a lot of money is going to come in basing that everything goes as normally planned. And that is obviously not the case.
Yeah, I mean, tonight's slate is a great example of just the most random dudes who score. It'll be fun to build some lineups here. brought to you today by No House Advantage. Is DFS for props. We'll talk about some of our picks for props later. But make sure before we get into these teams to click the like button. We really need a lot of support so we can give our best picks. So hit that thumbs up. Appreciate it, guys. So let's go into Denver. We talked a little bit about Brett Rypien. So the other difference this week for Denver is with Cortland Sutton on the IR. They have KJ Hamler as their new full-time receiver. Jerry Jeudy was inactive last week due to injury. He's active this week. And then Tim Patrick is their third receiver. So how are you liking the receivers if maybe Brett Rypien isn't the most exciting quarterback?
Yeah, I don't think we can guarantee that Rypien is terrible or that maybe he just doesn't connect once or twice. So I'm not ruling out the receivers. I believe on the year, Tim Patrick actually leads the team in receiving snaps, but that's probably because he's been the only guy who's been able to be healthy the whole time. I expect his snaps to come down a decent bit now that they have what we're now going to say is their full lineup without Cortland Sutton. Now that they have Jeudy and Hamler, who both missed time. Yeah, I think their full lineup looks like probably Jeudy and Hamler and maybe Patrick in the slot. I'm not sure. These guys can all kind of play different roles. I would say anytime that they're not running three wide receivers out, though, Tim Patrick comes off the field, and he has quite similarly priced to KJ Hamler. So I would say we see a lot of Jerry Jeudy, a decent amount of Hamler, and Tim Patrick is more of a flyer play. And in the same price range in terms of just a points per dollar projection, I would rather play Hamler there.
Nice. Did Jeudy play last week? I might have messed that up.
I was like, I have to go back and edit one of my articles. I said he played 2 games.
Sorry, guys. I totally screwed that one up. But so Jeudy, I guess he got injured in game 2, and he missed part of that game from what I'm looking at here. So
he was and he was questionable going into last week, and I don't think he got the full complement of snaps either. I'm guessing they're still working him back in.
Yeah, so he's gotten targeted 24 times this year, 8 per game, obviously. 25% of the time he's on the field, he's gotten a target. That is a really, really high number, and that makes him exciting. But his playing time hasn't been like exciting. It's only been on 68% of snaps or routes. So if you account for that injury, maybe like 75%, which is good but not great. KJ Hamler played 94% of he ran routes on 94% of passing plays last week, which was pretty exciting for me, given he's 3K. Now it's a showdown slate, and we have the ownership projections for you today, so make sure to check those out. Let's talk about the ownership of these guys because that's going to be a key factor given that Brett Rypien is throwing to them. We got KJ Hamler projected for 25% ownership, 2.9 at captain, and we got Jeudy at 37%. So based on that, like, how do you feel about the ownership?
Yeah, I think the ownership generally falls in line with what we should see. Jeudy being the most popular and Hamler being a solid bit less popular. But like you said, Hamler was on like 90+% of the receiving snaps. He's only 4,800. I think he is at minimum a great flex play. I do think he's viable at captain, although I don't love playing guys who are going to get UDFA first start on 1 week of practice passes being thrown to them. I don't love that, but Hamler is like such an incredible burner. There's this highlight of him returning a kick at Penn State, and he runs the entire length of the field in less than 11 seconds. Like, we didn't get to see his 40 because I believe he was injured during the combine, so he didn't get to do it. I can guarantee you the guy is quite fast, and on a showdown slate, one long play, and on a showdown slate that could only feature 2 to 3 touchdowns, one long play could be all you need. So I really do like Hamler. And like you said, Jeudy's playing time hasn't been great, but so far in the 2 games that we've seen him play limited basis without Cortland Sutton, he still leads the team in targets and air yards. I think he's tied with Noah Fant for targets specifically, a slight edge in air yards to Jeudy. I would expect, and maybe it's not the full complement of snaps for him this week, but in the next 2 to 3 weeks, this is a guy who they spent a first-round draft capital on. At some point, he does have to become a full-time wide receiver. We could see that tonight. So despite the quarterback play, which is terrifying, but anything can happen on a showdown slate. Who knows? Maybe Brett Rypien is just like actually good or good enough, like Gardner Minshew level good. Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler would be huge beneficiaries at very low ownership relative to the field if that's the case.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, with that unknown, it adds a lot of uncertainty to these guys, even though we know they have talent. as you mentioned, Judy, they spent a ton of draft capital on him. So we have high expectations. We've seen what all these top receiver picks from the 2019 draft have done, or 2020 draft. So that's been pretty impressive. So Judy, he looks like a really intriguing option despite the quarterback. He's been averaging 60 yards per game, which has been incredible. But like the weird thing is when I look at all my stats here, he's been targeted 18% of the time he's run a route. He's run routes on 81% of plays, which is really high for a tight end. But I feel like his production has been a little bit like abnormally high based on those numbers. But what are you seeing with Fan? I mean, he's a nice emerging talent for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he's incredibly athletic. His college numbers are great while he was competing at Iowa with another first-round tight end, TJ Hawkinson. But yeah, I will say, especially in the context of the offense, I know he scored in weeks 1 and 2. This offense is only getting worse. I'm not sure if we can exactly expect that. He's significantly more expensive, at least a decent bit more expensive than Jerry Jeudy, who I expect to basically just split that top receiving role. As I said, they split the targets in the 2 games without Cortland Sutton. Jerry Jeudy, the slight edge in air yards. That's reflected a bit in the ownership. He's got a handful of percentage points more of ownership, but I generally think that 1,200 price difference, I get it. This isn't the slate where I necessarily feel the need to pay up, but I do think that price difference probably makes Jerry Jeudy a slightly better play. Although an emerging talented player in his own right, I think I just give the edge to Jeudy here. And he's a receiver. Receivers are generally just a higher splash play upside. We haven't seen a lot of tight ends be the optimal captain, in basically the history of Showdown. So I give the lean to Jeudy. I don't think Fan is a bad play by any means, though.
Yeah, I think that Fan is solid. It's just I'm kind of looking at his projections so far, and I'm thinking maybe I'm not quite that high. So I agree with you. I'm more on Jeudy. Of course, passing yards are going to be hard to come by here for Rippin. So like that was a big hit to both of them, and maybe with Drew Lock, he'd be in better shape. Let's talk about the running backs. Philip Lindsay is inactive, so we got Royce Freeman backing up Melvin Gordon. And that seems to have made a nice little bump to Melvin Gordon's usage. What have you seen in these 2 games with Lindsay out?
Yeah, I mean, Freeman has 5 carries and I believe it's 2 catches. Yeah, 5 carries, 2 catches in those games without Lindsay. Lindsay in his first game, and he got injured in the game, so I would doubt he finished it. I believe it was like 7 carries and a catch, I believe. That is already more than, it's more than we've seen from Freeman in the 2 games that he's gotten to play. So in a serious advantage of playing time, Royce Freeman still just has not been able to back up Melvin Gordon the way Lindsay has. I think although it's an ugly game, if you're going to project for 75 to 80% of the backfield touches, Melvin Gordon, we have, I believe, as the highest owned captain play, but our top showdown page has him as actually still an advantageous play at captain. So I think Gordon, it's kind of a funny comparison. We had the Alvin Kamara smash spot where he was projected to be high owned, but our numbers said he actually should have been higher owned, and that ended up being the case. I guess you could call him the Melvin or the Alvin Kamara of this slate, given that he's getting so much of the backfield work. And although he's not going to score as much as Alvin Kamara, this entire slate looks so miserable that Melvin Gordon getting 18 carries, 4 targets gives him a very good chance to lead this slate in scoring. So actually, even though he's expensive, there are a lot of cheap options. I like him at captain, and I really struggled to get excited about Royce Freeman. I like Royce Freeman coming out of college, and he just has been a guy they will give anybody else the ball to if they can. So I'm not super excited about Royce Freeman as a punt play, given he just hasn't gotten the ball.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't given him very many touches, so that's really encouraging for Gordon. The Jets, Broncos, it's about 50-50 to win the game. If the Broncos win, you got to think Melvin Gordon is very likely to be a highest scoring player just because they probably aren't going to just pass every play with this 3rd string quarterback. So I expect a lot of rushing, and I think that Melvin Gordon, he's the knock on him in season long was he's in a timeshare with Philip Lindsay. Now that's Royce Freeman in a better spot. So I think he's solid. What about the other guys? Do you see any deep sleepers on this team?
I don't think this team honestly has that great of deep sleepers. I think there's actually significantly better deep sleepers on the other side. Deshaun Hamilton at 3,400, I think you could consider, although I think Tim Patrick is still a better play than him, a bit more expensive. Outside of that, I'm not really sure how much I see out of any of the deep sleepers. think on the other side of the ball is frankly where I would be looking to get my exposure to guys who are sub 3K, let's call it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's slim pickings on this team. I think Deshaun Hamilton, as you mentioned, he's going to be on the field a little bit. We also have Jake Butt. I know Chunk Yardage on Twitter was saying he's feeling a little butt tonight. So I think he was talking about football. And Jake Butt, he has been the second tight end this year, 22% of routes run last week. Any love for Jake Butt?
Yeah, I don't really see anyone else getting a ton of play behind him. I believe Albert Okungwebunam is inactive again. I like Alberto, but he's inactive again. Outside of that, I'm not sure we really see anyone else play as like a contributing role at tight end outside of Noah Fant and Butt. So Butt at 800 is definitely a guy you can consider. He's not going to have a lot of ownership, but like you said, he's clearly the second tight end. At all times, they are trying to get Noah Fant on the field. As a fifth or so of the snaps for Butt is worth giving a look. He's an okay play. He's more of a deep punt play. He's not a guy who I think just projects off the charts as like one of these smash values.
Yeah, for sure. He's a 1 or 2%er probably. The one encouraging thing about Butt is that he was more of a receiving tight end in college, and he's just been super injured in his NFL career.
Yeah.
So maybe you can get it going at some point, but really a long shot. And then Tyree Cleveland, Deontay Spencer, they've been getting some snaps. Andrew Beck at fullback. I mean, this tournament on DraftKings has 176,000 people. So you're talking about 1 to 2 standard deviations different. Would you ever consider one of those guys?
Yeah, I think in the in the largest tournaments you kind of have to. It's what we talked about with Nick Boyle coming in as the optimizer play, and then Devin Duvernay. I was talking about it. Devin Duvernay. I was like, I don't know. I guess there's a chance he outscores Boyle at the same price. You need a Devin Duvernay, and you still end up getting a chalky lineup anyway. So who cares? But on these deep pivots for like a tournament with 150, 200,000 people, I think you have to look at these guys. I'm not playing in that tournament because it's not my play style is to try and just go full, get a 0 owned lineup outside of myself. I think there's a bit more of an edge for my play style in fields with less than 100,000 people probably on Showdown. So I'm not looking to him, but if you're playing in that 200,000 opponents type of field, you can definitely look at them. I'm still probably looking to the other side though.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it can be appealing to go to one of these 1%ers. And I think in this 175,000 person tournament, I'm going to have lineups with a good amount of them, just kind of like taking shots on all of them, hoping for that fluke, but not anything to get excited about. So we got plenty of value on tonight's slate. No need to really go out of our way. So let's talk about No House Advantage. You got to bet props, but you don't have to play against the house. You play against other players. So it's a lot easier to beat Joe Schmo, in my opinion. And you pick 5 props from different players. It's a DFS style tournament, and you can get $20 for free if you use the promo code Awesemo. So make sure to go to nohouseadvantage.com and check that out. Definitely don't mind an extra $20. Let's talk about some props. So one that jumped out at me on No House Advantage is they have a prop for Brett Rippon to throw over. The prop is 1.5 interceptions. And I'm like, I've never seen a quarterback projected for that many interceptions. I looked at some other books as 0.5. So that's the one that's jumping at me is under. What are you looking at on No House Advantage?
Yeah, I think that's the clear, obvious one. I don't. It seems insane to me to project anyone at 1.5 interceptions, just such a random event. And honestly, there's a decent chance that he gets to 1 and like fumbles once and gets pulled anyways. I think you have other outs as well. Also, we talked about it at the top of the show. I'm sure they do not want him throwing a lot of passes. So just the volume alone that he would, that would help him get there is probably not going to be there for him. His prop for touchdown passes is at 1.5 as well. I'm taking the under on both of those. I don't believe in him a ton, so I don't believe in him at all, in fact. So the touchdown passes is an easy under, and I don't believe that they're going to want to throw with him at all. Why would you want to? So I'm going under on basically all of his props, but especially interceptions and touchdowns, which are both 1.5. I just don't see them airing it out, and he needs a little bit of that to get there.
Yeah, I mean, that is a ridiculous prop, so I think that one's solid. What about on the sports books? One that I took today, I'm kind of regretting this one actually, is I took Braxton Berrios under 40 passing yards. I took Sam Darnold under 220. Like this is a weird game where the Jets are actually the favorites. So I'm like, they're probably gonna run more than average. The fact that Frank Gore maybe contradicts that a little bit. And then Berrios, it's an interesting situation because he came in for Crowder on week 2. He didn't play in week 1 at all. Crowder got injured. Now Berrios in week 2 played most of the snaps. And now that Crowder's back, we still have Perryman out. So there's snaps to go around, but I'm just not confident in Berrios' role. But he had a really big week last week, so that makes me think maybe they just give him a shot anyway. But what do you feel about that Berrios prop, and what's a prop you're looking at?
Yeah, I don't love the Berrios stuff, but generally speaking, like who else are they going to throw it to? Chris Herndon has looked so incredibly bad. My deep best ball shares of Chris Herndon are so sad because he's got like 4 of 9 targets. He's averaging like under 5, maybe even under 4 yards per target. I get Sam Darnold has been bad, but he has not been that bad. So really, who else are they going to be throwing it to? Like Michael Pirine or Chris Hogan, who's active tonight? I don't hate, the over on Braxton Berrios. I think it was, I forget which book it was on. It was like high 220s. I think it was actually even 230.5 or 231.5 for Sam Darnold passing yards. I smashed that under. It was minus 115, so you pay a little bit of juice, but I'd smashed that under. He's gone 0 of 6 on his past 3 games, essentially going at 231.5. And last year he slightly went under that in 8 of, I believe it was 13 games. So, and yeah, they're favorites this time, which is quite concerning for their passing game. We haven't seen them as favorites, or maybe they definitely weren't favored the past 2 games. I don't know who they played week 1. They haven't ever won, and it hasn't been particularly close. If they're actually going to win this game, they're going to run the ball so much. So for me, I think any Sam Darnold unders are probably good plays. I saw a 230, and I hit that pretty quickly on the under.
Man, I should have been shopping the odds because you got.
It was on. That's how I found it. It was on OddsShopper. It was, I forget which book it was, but yeah, I just clicked on OddsShopper on one of our articles that linked off to it and found 230.5 or 231.5. It was one of those two, and I smashed that under pretty quickly.
Nice. If you guys want to find the best odds, make sure to check that out at oddshopper.awesemo.com. So let's talk about the Jets. So, I mean, the thing that sticks out like a sore thumb is their lead running back, Frank Gore. I mean, who would have thought that Frank Gore would be in a starting role this year? So how are you handling Frank Gore? I mean, obviously he's getting rushing attempts. He's never been a good pass catcher. Is he cracking your lineups?
Yeah, so actually I found the line. It's 232.5. You can under 232.5 for Sam Darnold. He's not getting there. So, and part of the reason he's not getting there, like you talked about, Frank Gore. And if you know anything about Frank Gore, you should have expected him starting for some NFL team by week 3 of the NFL season, week 4 of the NFL season. If you've ever met Frank Gore, he'll tell you that he will usurp other backs quickly. This team, yeah, they've given him a ton of looks. When they're not losing by 14, they're one of the 4 run heaviest teams in the NFL. They're only one of 4 teams when the game is within 2 scores, which is a very wide margin. You can be losing by 13, and they are still one of the 4 teams that runs the ball more than they pass the ball. Even when they're losing by 12, 13, they're still running the ball a ton. So that's led Frank Gore to, I believe, nearly 40 carries so far. Hasn't done a ton with it, but in a game where I don't think anybody's going to be doing much, I actually do have a decent amount of exposure to Frank Gore. I don't have a lot of him. I don't really have much of him in the captain spot. I think he's more of just a good kind of lineup filler. He'll probably chew up some yardage in a game where yardage might be all you need to get there. And if they're going to be winning this game, it could be the most carries we've seen from Frank Gore this season. So I actually do think Frank Gore is like kind of an ugly, not bad play.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to disagree with that because he's game script proof. As you mentioned, even in garbage time, the Jets are running the ball, which is one of the most ridiculous things.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So it wouldn't be that surprising to see Frank Gore running in at the end of the game, win or lose. I know you mentioned Pirine, Lamical Pirine. He was a 3rd round pick this year. started off the year injured. He's kind of been working his way back from injury, getting a decent amount of work last week. He got 7 rushing attempts to Gore's 15. Kalen Balazs got 3, and he ran a decent amount of routes. So I'm kind of thinking that Piron's role is going to be increasing throughout the season. But I mean, I don't think it, like, given that 15-7 ratio, that is going to not be Gore leading the team in rushing attempts. So what do you make of Piron's situation?
Yeah, P. Ryan, I'm not projecting him to out-touch Gore, but he is kind of interesting. Like you said, they spent some draft capital on him, despite the fact that at the time they had Le'Veon Bell, and they still saw this as a guy they wanted to add to their team, which I think is at least interesting that the team only has so many draft picks, and they chose to spend one of their highest ones on P. Ryan. You talked about it last week. He was getting some touches coming off of an injury, and it would make sense that a team that is, if they have any amount of self-awareness, would know that they are in essentially a rebuild mode once again. They should want to get some of their younger guys looks, and they already did get him looks last week. He's 1,800, I believe, and he was a significant pass-catching threat at Florida. He caught 40 of his 50, I believe, targets, and the only reason he didn't catch all of them is he only had 1 drop, but there was a handful of errant passes to him. Has a lot of chops in the passing game. If the Jets do end up, being at a deficit, we could see more work from him. And as we saw last week, they're gonna be running a lot no matter what, because they just don't care. So I actually think he's one of the better cheap plays, one of my highest owned plays under 2 or 3K.
I agree, man. I think that he's safe to get a decent amount of work. It could be more than we expect to. That's a possibility. But just given the draft capital, I think he'll be out there. Then their last running back is Kalen Balazs. He got some work last week, but there was a lot of garbage time. So Piron's definitely my preferred option, but do you have any Balazs?
Yeah, I don't have zero exposure to Balazs because, like you said, we saw them give him some work last week. But frankly, I would just project P. Ryan to have more touches, at least definitely more, or at least as much upside in the receiving game. He's younger, and we have like a reasonable sample. I get like it's just yards per carry, but if there's anyone that we can confidently say has no ability as a running back, it's probably Kalen Balazs. He's so bad. So like I'll just take the discount. I'm not sure exactly how it splits out in terms of the split between Balazs and P. Ryan behind Gore. But I'm just going to take the cheaper one and P. Ryan, a significantly price discount. I know this isn't a slate where you need a ton of money, but you still want to be getting up to some of the good plays. I still want to get Melvin Gordon and captain. An easy way to do that is to get P. Ryan in. We don't know the split, but we do know the prices, and the prices say just play P. Ryan.
Yeah, I think people don't know P. Ryan either, so it's not like he's going to be owned. So I agree. It's pretty clear that P. Ryan is the preferable option there. So we have Jamison Crowder back from injury. I'm expecting him to just be fully back, and he had a big week in week 1. He ran a ton of routes. He was on the field 98% of the time in the passing plays, so I think he's a solid option. How do you feel about Crowder tonight?
Yeah, I have a lot of Crowder tonight, and I'm not sure in what capacity we see him back. Basically, every report said that he isn't going to be at 100%. 19% of P-Ryan, 19% of Crowder is probably better than Berrios or Hogan or Herndon. You don't need to be much to be this team's top receiver. And like you said, I think it was at 37% target share in week 1 on those 13 targets. They're going to get him the ball as much as possible because I can't imagine that they have any other guys who they actually think are talented weapons. And he broke off a really nice long catch. That was his touchdown, was he broke a handful of tackles. Even if he's not at 100%, they're going to use him as if he is 100% because they don't have a choice really. Unless he gets a re-injury, I can't see them not force-feeding this guy. So I think he actually makes sense regardless of what you think of Sam Darnold either, because he can just get a ton of targets. The targets don't necessarily help Sam Darnold. It's only, the yardage that will help him. So we could see 10 catches out of Jamison Crowder, and you don't necessarily have to have Sam Darnold. You can still be off of Sam Darnold, playing Broncos defense if that's your move, and playing Jamison Crowder, because I will be playing a lot of Jamison Crowder.
Yeah, definitely. And he's not even high owned. So I think Crowder really stands out. On our ownership projection, we have him at 6% in the MVP, 26% in utility. He's basically the number 1 option in the Jets today. So that makes a lot of sense to kind of pay up to be contrarian there. So The rest of the team, I mean, you mentioned Herndon being bad. He has been getting targeted at a really high rate.
He does. 3%. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. The thing is, he's not running routes at a high rate. Is 60% compared to Font. That's like 20% less. So the route running he's blocking on more snaps. But how does Herndon stack up with the rest of the options today?
Yeah, Herndon is not a guy I'm really looking at, honestly, in a similar, like that medium to low price range. I would rather be playing guys like, I'd even honestly go to Chris Hogan. I think KJ Hamler is a far better play. Tim Patrick is a guy I'd rather look to. Maybe you go with Herndon as like a bit of a contrarian play, but he's garnering a respectable amount of ownership. It's not like you're going super off the wall by playing Herndon. So I don't know. I just can't get myself excited about a guy who's been so inefficient. Seems like they want to use him as a blocker. Honestly, as the contrarian pivot, I'd rather play like Ryan Griffin at his price.
Oh, that's a hot take. I mean, Griffin, he has 0 targets this season, unless I have an error in my sheet. He's been running routes, so 23% of routes. It might be a naming thing because there's another Ryan Griffin. Let me check.
I think it is. I ran into this problem too. He didn't catch any of his targets, but he had 2 targets I believe it was last week. Yeah, I found this too. I was trying to figure out why I didn't have Ryan Griffin with any stats. One, because he sort of doesn't have any, but he did have 2 targets last week, and he had some blow up spots last season. I believe they signed him to an extension as well. If Chris Herndon continues to be terrible on a per target basis, like Ryan Griffin will probably continue to get involved. I don't know if it happens this week, but he's super cheap. I would think I would take him at 600 over any of the Broncos punts is probably where I'm kind of drawing the line at.
Nice. The playing time is pretty comparable to Jake Butt. So would you say those two are kind of equal options?
Yeah, they're very much in that same range. I'd say I'd give the slight edge to Ryan Griffin, but maybe that's just me not liking Chris Herndon and sort of projecting that outwards. They're very similar. I don't feel super strong either way. Yes.
Yeah, it's a good point that fans going to be on the field more with Bud than Herndon and Griffin will be running routes together. So I think that's interesting. Now, as far as I know, you mentioned some deep sleepers on this team. We just talked about Ryan Griffin. I'd call him a super deep sleeper. Anyone else you're looking at from the Jets?
So we have an interesting projection on Josh Malone. I mean, we have Josh Malone with a projection, which I guess is why he's projecting his value. I'm not super huge on him. I think as far as I would go outside of Ryan Griffin would just be, we have a very reasonable value projection on Chris Hogan. We've seen Chris Hogan mostly disappoint, but so have all the Jets. If he's going to be on the field a decent amount, he is active this game. I think he's an okay punt play. Griffin would be my preferred, but really it's a lot of P. Ryan.
Nice. Yeah, I think P. Ryan is solid. Let's look at the ownership for all these guys. So P. Ryan's only 14% owned. Hogan is 18%. As you mentioned, Josh Malone is getting some ownership. He's only 200. So as far as 200 guys, I think he's going to play, which is more than I can say about other guys who are 200. So maybe if you just really love 5 guys that cost 49.8K, then I don't hate it. Although Ryan Griffin is a much more reliable option for playing time, I'd say. Now let's talk about the defense, because this is the big question. I think Jets defense and captain is going to be pretty popular. When I've been running crunches, I've been getting that a lot. Oh, and one note to everyone: if you're using Fantasy Cruncher, make sure on this slate to set the defense allowed versus offensive players to something other than the default, because you're going to want to include defenses as much as you can on this slate, I'd say. But the Jets defense versus Ripon, you got to think they're in a 6th spot. And the thing is, both of these defenses really haven't been bad. They've been above average versus the run and the pass in the most recent games. So I'm thinking that defense looks pretty good here. You got 11 guys instead of 1. So how do you feel about Jets D?
I was like, oh man, the Jets gave up a lot of points last week. I'm surprised they're above average because their offense gave up all the freaking points. Come on, Jets. Come on, Sam. I'm for maybe the first time, I'd have to recall all the showdown slates. more so than any other slate this year, I will say, I'm going to be probably over the field on these defenses, especially in flex. Like when you look at games with low totals, that is where you see a lot of our defenses. I wrote this up in my Showdown piece, but there is this like very straight line correlation of the lower the total, the more defenses have made the winning lineups. I think that we've had so many good games that people aren't going to respect just how viable these defenses are. I know they're garnering some ownership. I think I'm pretty comfortable being over the field on them. That's probably also because I'm going to have like neither of these quarterbacks very highly owned in captain. So I think that makes me more comfortable getting either Broncos or Jets defense. And as you said, you get 11 times the amount of guys.
Yeah, and that's not even counting special teams. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, the number of guys per dollar you get is just insane.
Guys per dollar.
Yeah, Jets defense. They are one of the top values on today's slate as well. They're 4K on DraftKings, and that is about the same price that defense has been on other slates. Clearly, this is a much better spot, so they really stand out. Now, let's talk about FanDuel a little bit because we haven't really been dropping the FanDuel knowledge. Is there anyone on FanDuel that stands out for the Jets?
For the Jets, I don't love this Jet side, especially because so much of it is I feel okay about the receivers, like on DraftKings specifically. I really like Jamison Crowder. I'm going to go over the field on him on DraftKings. I'm not really looking to get a ton of ownership at the receiver position in terms of on FanDuel because it's just not the scoring format, the style that you want to play receivers at captain as much relative to, like, it's not a 0% ownership on all receivers every slate, but it's less than DraftKings. I think there's a small chance that if Frank Gore scores essentially a touchdown, that could be one of the 3 touchdowns scored in this game. I don't absolutely hate Frank Gore. Am I crazy for thinking Frank Gore isn't the worst play on FanDuel? I'm going to be over the field by a lot on Melvin Gordon. On the other side, I don't know, man. Frank Gore isn't disgusting. He's kind of disgusting, but.
No, I mean, I agree with you that the receivers get a big downgrade on FanDuel at captain because it's harder for them to outscore the quarterback. So usually I try to run with either the quarterback or a running back. And you can go to my top showdown plays tool to find out all the probabilities I'm projecting here. Frank Gore, I have as a 6% chance of being the top scoring player compared to 4% projected ownership. So I'd say maybe a little bit crazy, but like given that he's competing against guys like Jamison Crowder, Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant, not really top fantasy producers either. So I think I can feel some Frank Gore tonight at captain. So let's talk about kicker. There was some chatter on Twitter about maybe taking a kicker at captain. That might be a step too far for me, but I don't hate me some Brandon McManus or Sam Ficken tonight. How are you feeling about these guys?
I think they're both fine flex plays, but we only saw it happen once last year. And I think part of the problem is that this game is going to be so bad. Like, you need a certain level of offensive competency to get in the opposing, like in your field goal range, to get on the opposing side of the field and get your kicker in range. So if we're projecting this game to be so low scoring, to be so miserable, yes, that does sort of put kickers more in play. We have to understand that kickers are in some sense correlated with their offense. So it also lowers their projection. It's not like kickers are a lock to make 3 field goals. So when nobody scores, they're the best play. They're not a lock to make 3 field goals and 2 extra points when the game is going to be so low. So I'm actually not going to be very much, if at all, exposed to them in the captain spot. But that also does align with the tournaments I'm playing in. I'm not playing in that giant 200,000 person tournament. So because of that, I don't feel the need to get super contrarian. I can understand why you would do it if you are trying to build a solo or, as close as possible you can project to a solo used lineup in that giant field.
Yeah, and I mean, that's good advice because you need to be building lineups tailored to the tournament you're playing in. And there's no one size fits all advice for this stuff. So, I mean, that's part of, where some guys are going to be good plays in large field and others are going to be good plays in the smaller field. One that I got lucky on the other night was Mecole Hardman. He was really expensive on FanDuel, and that really threw his ownership down, but just a really high variance player. So in a higher stakes tournament, like maybe you don't have to get that crazy to be contrarian. So let's talk about our favorite captains tonight. So before we do that, let's get some thumbs up here in the audience, guys. We appreciate you. Thank you for listening. Make sure to hit us back with this thumbs up on YouTube. Helps us a lot. All right, Kyle, who are your favorite captains tonight? I'll start with DraftKings, and then we can talk FanDuel.
Yeah, on both, I'll be well over the field on Melvin Gordon. I'm probably going to come in underweight on the quarterbacks. I think Jamison Crowder specifically because he doesn't have to, like Sam Darnold can play bad and still just force feed him 14, 15 targets, I think is a great play. As far as I would go down, I would say it's not crazy to have some exposure to KJ Hamler. My only problem with Hamler is that he saves you money on a slate where I don't think you need to save money. So another guy who I even in the non-giant tournament on DraftKings, I will still actually have some exposure to him. It just won't be as much as I think I would if I was playing in that largest tournament. Jerry Jeudy is a guy I'm going to be well over the field on him. I just think that I can see a scenario in which Brett Rippon isn't terrible. Jerry Jeudy's market share numbers would make him a great play to capitalize on that. And he's basically the similar ownership as Noah Fant, but significantly cheaper. So those are the guys that I will be probably over the field on in terms of captain. Even Jets, I think, we look at them, their captain ownership is basically quite similar to what their top percentage chance of being the number one play is. But when you adjust that for their salary, they're actually a pretty solid play at captain. So I don't think Jets are the worst play at captain. I'd probably go heavier on Jets than I would Broncos, for instance.
Yeah, I mean the Jets defense, versus this Rippon guy, you gotta love that. I'm a little bit worried on this slate that defense is kind of like the fancy play du jour, where it's everyone's like, oh, Jets versus Broncos. Wouldn't it be funny if defense was the highest scorer? And there's a much higher likelihood of that happening, but let's see. We have the defensive ownership a lot higher than normal today. Broncos 8% of captain, Jets 8% of captain as well. So we might see a lot of defense. I mean, they're solid plays too, especially for the price. Jets at 4K, that saves you a ton of salary, as you're saying. So. I think that'll be one of the decision points you have to make playing today's slate is how are you going to handle defense, because it's so different than other slates. No.
Yeah, I agree. It's so difficult because, like you said, they don't really make you pay any extra, despite these defenses being just such better spots than every other showdown slate. So it makes it quite easy to get onto them. And I agree. If we're ever going to see an actual a decent percentage of defenses at captain, it will obviously be tonight, maybe more than any other showdown slate of the year, given the state of this game.
I think so. So don't be surprised if you think you're being sneaky by captaining defense. Then I think that might not be true, but I still have a lot of defense at captain just because the value is insane. I like the Broncos too, kind of because the Jets stand out as maybe the slightly better option, but as far as probability, they're pretty close. Now, you mentioned Gordon. I think he's a really solid captain. Herndon, he's standing out to me. Frank Gore. Only projected for 2% ownership in the captain spot. So I kind of like that. And then Braxton Berrios, 0% at captain in our projections. Well, there's going to be at least one lineup if I have anything to say about it. So how about on FanDuel? Who are you landing on at captain on FanDuel?
Yeah, going back to our top showdown plays tool, which I think is just quite useful, as a shorthand to figure out what people are doing versus what the actual numbers would back up. Why are people so excited to play two awful quarterbacks? I'm going to have so much exposure to Melvin Gordon. I think below him, Jamison Crowder, another guy who, although he does sort of project as a guy who you'd be more excited in PPR, this is a slate where there are not a lot of great options. His market share numbers also point to very high yardage on this slate and very high relative to this not being a game with a lot of scoring, a very high touchdown probability relative to, Braxton Berrios, Chris Hogan, all of these guys. So Melvin Gordon, first and foremost, I think you can just be comfortable eating some chalk and knowing that it's probably very smart chalk to eat. Jamison Crowder, Frank Gore, doesn't take a ton to be over the field on him, but I think his backfield touches are quite impressive. I mean, there's 36 through 2 games. We know they want to run the ball a ton. I get it, and he's old and he's probably slow and he doesn't catch passes, but one touchdown could be really all you need from him. Outside of that, looking a little deeper, I could see myself getting into some Hamler, but I'm probably just going to be over the field on Gordon, Crowder, and I guess Gore mostly.
Nice. Yeah, I think Crowder is, that today is a day where just like getting the most yards seems like that might be the highest scoring player. So on FanDuel, like even though you're disadvantaged by the 0.5 PPR, like his yardage total and Frank Gore's yardage total, for example. I mean, I think I have Crowder projected for a little bit more yardage. So like he stands out as a solid play. The quarterback's a lot more viable on FanDuel. I know you're saying you don't love him, but I gotta throw some love to Ripon because just the way the scoring works, if he gets 250 yards and a touchdown, like he could be the highest scoring player. So
yeah, I'm not saying go 0 on him. I'm not saying if you're building 150, you should be going 0 on him. I'll probably be under the field just because I'm shifting most of that to Gordon. But there's definitely a chance that this game is so bad that his 200 yards and 1 touchdown is more than enough. So don't go 0 on him. Definitely consider playing either quarterback. I'll probably be lower in the field on them, but that's mostly out of my Gordon ownership.
Yeah, it's so interesting because like even though both teams are really bad, it's like on the offensive side. So it's not even like you can expect Darnold or Ripon to have a decent game just based on the matchup. So Gordon does seem like the highest percentage play, and on the top single game plays that holds true as well. So I think Gordon's probably the best play at captain on FanDuel. Let's talk about some general final thoughts for this slate. If you guys have any questions in chat, let us know, and you can add me in our customer Slack. So I'll be keeping an eye out for those. But yeah, what this is such an unusual slate in that like usually they have really good teams faced off against each other for these island games, but tonight is some of the worst teams. So how does that change your approach tonight? Let's recap.
Yeah, so one thing that we haven't talked about specifically, and I thought was interesting, was that I would have thought that there are enough bad Thursday night football games, or just enough showdown slates, that even if they do feature good games, things just go awry, and some games are going to hit massive unders, and that does happen. There was only one instance last year, excluding the playoffs, but I can't remember a playoff game that could fall into this category, where 2 defenses made the winning lineup at all, captain, flex, whatever. There's only one time. And I believe that is most likely because if one defense is going to make the optimal lineup, they've probably got a decent number of 3-and-outs, turnovers, potentially a touchdown, and outside of the touchdown. But, the field position, the time of possession, all the things that a defense doing well gives their offense means that 2 defenses are, even if the game score is low, a defense getting a 3-and-out or a sack or like a stop on 4th down really improves the projection of their offense, which means the opposing defense is inversely hurt by that. So I think maybe there has to be a certain amount of people who are going to be playing two defenses tonight, and I get it. But, if Denver tees off on Sam Darnold, they have probably recovered a fumble in opposing territory, and that really hurts the opposing defense's projection. So I think that might be a scenario where I'll open the field to you on this. I think I'm probably going to not really have any exposure to double defense because I do think they have a sneaky amount of inverse correlation.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of the quirks in scoring is I think that points scored by a defense don't hurt the other defense's fantasy score. It's only offensive touchdowns, I think. Is that right? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I believe you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting because you want your defense get the touchdown, obviously, but then if they don't get the touchdown, they just get the fumble recovery. Obviously, it's really bad for the other team. So it wouldn't be crazy to see 2 defensive touchdowns here, one by each team, but we know the odds of that are pretty low. I think something like 10% of interceptions offhand, don't quote me on this, become touchdowns, like a pick 6. So it is pretty unlikely, even though we expect these guys to throw more interceptions than average, that will really make a huge dent. So I think going 2 defenses, one at captain, that might be getting a little too cute, as you said. It's interesting, the correlation between the 2 teams, because when one's on the offense that the other one can't be. So, someone's going to be running a lot of plays, and that's bad for the defense. So, overall, like, I wouldn't necessarily look at the historical trends a ton when I'm trying to determine this, because this slate is just so much different than your average slate, and it's always good to account for that. So I think that it's all a matter of how you use them, really, like anything. But defense tonight, I pretty much think their Jets defense is definitely the top value play in my opinion. And like they make a nice little addition to any lineup. And then it's interesting because the Broncos are actually kind of expensive. So I think they might be a lot lower owned, and then they're a little contrarian. But I guess what we're hitting at is maybe everyone's going to be thinking like this and really honed in on defense when we know it's the hardest position to score a high score in the game. So maybe just try to find the diamonds in the rough more, the offensive players that maybe it hurts a little bit to roster. But let's see if we got any questions in the chat here. Let's see. Marco says, my issue with D is you're looking for the pick six to actually be optimal, and the chances are good because the quarterbacks aren't good. The scores won't be high today, most likely. So maybe you just don't need as many points from your captain. So what do you think about that?
Oh yeah, I'm going to be probably over the field on both defenses individually, especially the Jets. I think their ownership projection is fair. But like you said, they're one of the top value plays, and you don't have to go like you can't on a showdown slate go contrarian every single spot. You just can't do that. It's a showdown slate. There are only so many options. So I'm going to be over the field on both of them. I probably just won't have a ton of double them. Yeah, I wouldn't shy away from defenses on this slate. And even, I think the touchdown odds aren't great, obviously, for any defense, but this is a slate where you don't need the touchdown if the game is supposed to go as Vegas plans. So I would say defenses on this slate, you don't have to talk about it as well. If they score a touchdown, there's a non-zero chance that happens. They could just hold the opponent to a low score and put up like 10 points, and that could be the optimal.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's not that hard to imagine in this matchup tonight. Yeah. So I think let's talk about some general strategy a little bit. As people are finishing their lineups, maybe putting the last guy in. So like how you handle quarterbacks is always interesting. My general rule is if I have a quarterback, like especially one that gets most of their fantasy production through passing, like Darnold and probably Rippon, I think if you have them, you're going to want to put a pass catcher in the lineup, if not two. So is that true for you tonight, even though these guys are a lot worse than average?
Yeah, it's specifically because I don't, obviously we have no NFL sample on Brett Rippon, but he was a non-factor as a rusher in college football. So, our data says that he's probably not going to be a factor as a rusher in the NFL. Same with Sam Darnold for the most part. He's got a little bit of athleticism, but these guys really will need one of their, if not multiple of their pass catchers to go off in a game that has a crappy total. I think if you're building rules, you only need to set a minimum of one of their pass catchers because it could just be that kind of game. I would say on the other hand, though, especially with a guy like Crowder, maybe more so than anybody else, like his points don't necessarily, because some of them will be reception based, specifically on DraftKings, don't necessarily have this perfect correlation with Darnold. So I don't think you necessarily have to play them together in every single lineup. Maybe it'll be a bit contrarian to even do that. But yeah, on the other side, because they offer no rushing upside, I would still be, despite it being a weird game, getting a minimum of one of their pass catchers in. And I like their pass catchers as value, specifically Crowder, and I like Judy. So it goes well with the strategy I'm playing anyways.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's not like a mandatory thing if you have Crowder to get in Darnold, but
yeah,
it does improve Darnold's projection if Crowder has a good game. So that's always something to factor in. We got a question from Millie, our Mill 1155. Do you like Crowder as FanDuel captain? I think he's pretty solid just because it's all about who can get the most yards and touchdowns. And I have him for 60 yards. If you can get maybe a one standard deviation above that, like you're saying, you're at like 100. So that would look pretty good for being the captain. Kyle, how do you feel about Crowder at captain at FanDuel?
I completely agree, because this, as we talked about, this game, although normally I'm looking for, like, I'm not as excited about the half PPR for receivers, this game could just be a battle of who can scrap together 90 yards and a touchdown at best. So, yeah, I think in a normal slate, I'm probably not super excited about Crowder at captain, or MVP, I guess, to be clear. This is not a normal slate. So Crowder breaking kind of my norms of not being super excited about receivers at MVP. I actually think he's probably a guy who I'm comfortable being over the field on, just because it could, based on this total, just be a battle of a handful of yards making a difference. And he certainly has yardage upside. His market share numbers as a receiver were crazy in week 1.
Yeah, he's the best player on the Jets probably, and I think that he's a solid pick in flex or captain. Got a question from Frank Kern. Do you play League of Legends? I thought your chair said LCS. Yeah, I got it during the pandemic because we do a lot of fantasy League of Legends when there's no sports apparently. So, Kyle, have you tried any LOL fantasy?
It's super funny. I had a really boring paper pushing job last summer, and I played, like, before anyone got into it. I was playing League of Legends because that was the only thing I could sweat at my desk job at 8 a.m, as far as I knew. So I played last year, and I was too busy to do it this year when it actually got popular. But I have played before, yes.
That's awesome. Yeah,
I never played the game though. Just sweat it. Never played it.
Nice. Yeah, it's fun to sweat, and they have the Worlds going on right now, so we have projections up for that. Next slate is Saturday, so that's exciting. Let's see here. Any last thoughts? We got 2 minutes left.
2 minutes left. Yeah, I would say for me, not super excited about the quarterback, specifically on DraftKings, on FanDuel, despite the fact that I don't like them. Definitely have to put them in consideration. Melvin Gordon comes in as, I think, a popular play, but I don't think people realize just how much his projection in terms of just having a solid market share numbers as both a pass catcher and a runner out of the backfield. He's a guy who I'm going to be particularly excited on. And it sounds like you and I are both sneaky in on LaMichael P. Ryan, this guy who just, his price is so low for a guy who's essentially like, you know, the number 2 in a committee, which is good. He should be like, I don't know, 3.5K or something. So I'll be on the running backs. It's a game for running backs, I guess.
I hope so, man. Yeah, running back, defense. Let's see an ugly football game here. We do have one question here in the chat. Straight up, who do you think wins this game? I mean, we don't normally really try to predict that, but it's a pick 'em. So let's try. Kyle, who you got?
I'm going to say the unknown upside of Brett Rippon. I'll go with Rippon versus the Jets. But yeah, don't bet this. I don't have any strong lean.
Yeah, it's tough to really call it. I guess Darnold, being the more experienced quarterback, even though he's not good.
His experiences are bad.
Yeah. I guess like if you have experience, but it didn't go very well at all, maybe that's not good. But I kind of think maybe the Jets pulled off, which sadly I bet the other side. So I'm really nervous about this. But it should be a good one, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we got 1 minute to lock. Everybody, good luck tonight. Hopefully we get an exciting game because there's nothing else to watch. We got some baseball, but make sure to check out our sponsor, No House Advantage, and all of the great content we have on the site, awesemo.com. So guys, good luck tonight, and thanks a lot for tuning in.